In this lesson, what we're going to be doing is finding the percent of change. To understand what we're doing here, we're looking at how much something changes. For instance, if we looked at gas prices, we could compare gas prices in 2000 to gas prices in 2015 and look for the percent of change. Did they increase? Did they decrease? And by how much of that original value? So in order to do this, there is the formula. What we have is our new amount minus the original amount, and that is going to be divided by the original amount. So again, finding this percent of change, we have a simple formula. You take the new amount, subtract the original from that, and divide that value by the original amount. When we look at the problem here, it says what percent of increase from 4 to 7? What is the percent of increase from 4 to 7? So they're already telling us that it is a increase. And I can see that represented here when I start at 4 and I'm going to 7. So we see this idea that I'm starting here. So that is my original. And I'm going to end up here. That is my new. That formula that we just talked about was new minus original divided by original. All I'm going to do is identify those two values and I substitute them in. So I have 7 minus 4 divided by 4. The first step I'm going to do here is my subtraction. So I substitute. Now I subtract. 7 minus 4 is 3. And I'm just going to bring this 4 down. I didn't change anything there, so I bring that down. Now I can do my math here. 3 divided by 4 is going to be 0.75 or 75 hundredths. Now I am looking for this percent of increase. I have a decimal value. To change a decimal to a percent, we multiply it by 100 or move our decimal 2 places to the right. So my percent of increase is 75%. And I've finished the problem. When we look at this next problem, again we have this idea that I'm looking for the new minus the original over the original. So I need to identify those two things. What is the percent of change? So this time it just says a percent of change. We don't necessarily know if it's the increase or decrease right away. So I look from 400,000. So here is my original to 200,000. When I look at this, now I already have some options for answers here. And I want to go ahead and start thinking about, well, what is this going to be? I start at 400,000 and I'm going to end up at 200,000. So I know that my value is a decrease. So I can already get rid of 2 of those options. Now we won't always have multiple choice, but for some of these it is nice to start kind of thinking ahead in the game. So I substitute my values in. My new was 200,000 minus my original, which was 400,000, and all of that is going to be written over 400,000. Next step I do is subtract. 200,000 minus 400,000 is going to be a negative 200,000, and I still have not changed or modified that amount in the denominator. So now, after I've subtracted in the numerator, I'm going to go ahead and divide this. Negative 200,000 divided by 400,000 is going to be negative 0.5 or negative 5/10. Again, I need the percent of change, so I need to convert this to a percent. I move the decimal 2 places right. Since I don't have a value in this spot right here, I'm going to fill it in with a 0. And this becomes 50%. Now, one thing I want to point out, this negative here, what we use that for is to help us decide if it's going to be an increase or decrease. If this value comes out positive, this decimal value, that means you have a percent of increase. With the negative, that means that we have a 50% decrease. And we can look up at the top, we see our 50% decrease, so that would be our correct answer here. With the word problems, we want to make sure that we understand what's going on. We always kind of think about this as a chronological time. I want to know what happened first because that's always going to represent that original amount. So we can read our problem. A while ago, Pedro bought shares of a stock in a high-tech firm. At that time, the selling price was $10 per share. According to today's newspaper, the shares are now worth $17 per share. What is the percent of increase in the value of the stock? Well, as we look through this, one of the things that I really like to do is look at the key wording. At that time, the selling price was $10 a share. According to today's newspaper, they are now worth $17 per share. I can easily tell that this $10, and I'm going to come down here and I'm just going to make a little note for myself. The original is the $10 and the new is my $17. I can tell chronologically and how the wording is in here that I started at 10 and now it's worth 17. So again, it's that same process. The new minus the original divided by the original. Once I substitute, I'm going to subtract. 17 minus 10 is 7. I have not changed that denominator yet, so I just bring that down. Now I have 7 divided by 10 is going to be 0.7. Again, this is positive. So that tells me, and I should be able to tell from the beginning that if I started at $10 and now I'm at 17, it was a percent increase. By that being positive, I know my math was set up properly. The last step I have to do is move that decimal 2 spots to go from the decimal to the percent, multiplying by 100, and I end up with a final answer of 70% increase. This problem's a little bit different. When we look at this, it says Lee's book sold 560 bookmarks last year. This year, the store sold 15% fewer. How many bookmarks did the store sell this year? So what we have is a value here of what they sold last year, a percent fewer they sold this year. How many did they sell this year? So I have my original value, this 560. I'm looking for how many I sold this year. So I'm looking for that new. Our approach here is a little bit different. We think about what we have here. If last year I sold 560 bookmarks, that is my original amount. 560 equals 100% of the original value. We're saying that this year we sold 15% fewer of those bookmarks. So I don't know what this value is. What I do know is that it's 15% fewer. So what I can do to figure this out is if I take my 100% and I subtract the 15%, I find that I sold 85% of last year's bookmarks. Once I understand that I can set it up like this because it's telling me that I sold 15% fewer from my 100% that I sold last year, I can convert my 85% to a decimal. So that moves 2 places. All percents are out of 100. So 85 divided by 100 is going to be my decimal 85 or 85 hundredths. I take that value and I multiply my 85 hundredths times the original amount because that's what I have. I have 85% of original value. When I multiply those together, I get 476 bookmarks. And I can look up here, there's my correct answer. So again, we take that 100% of the original. That's where we're starting at. That starting value is always the 100%. Because it is fewer, I know that I can subtract whatever percent less I have. So 100 minus 15%. Convert that to the decimal and multiply it back to the original value. With this one, it's the same idea as the last problem. Candace loves to compete in triathlons. At a race a few months ago, she finished in 210 minutes. At the race yesterday, she took 30% more time to finish. What was her time? So again, we can see at a race a few months ago, and this one was a race yesterday. So my original time was this 210 minutes. My new time is what I'm looking for, but I know that it was 30% more time to finish this one. My original 210 is my 100%. I know my new was 30% more. So I know I added time to this, it increased by 30%. So this is 130% of the time from the previous race. I convert that to the decimal, divide 130 by 100, and I get 1.3. Again, all I have to do now is take this value, 1.3 times the original value. And as I'm looking at this, I know that my answer's got to be greater than 210. So if it is a multiple choice, I could look any number that's less than that, I could have eliminated. This one doesn't have that. So I go ahead and finish out my math. When I multiply this, I get 273 minutes. 273 minutes, and I can see that answer right here. So again, we know that the original is always going to be 100%. We look for those key words, more time. On the last problem, it was fewer. So that tells me if I'm adding our percent to the 100 or if I need to subtract. In this case, because it was more, we added that. Once I get my total percent, again, my percent of change was 30%. It increased that 100% by 30% more. I convert that to the decimal and then take this value and multiply it back to the original value because it's 130% or 1.3 of that original value, and I get my solution. So that's our process for finding percent of change. Again, that formula is new minus original divided by original. The 4 steps that we want to go through here. The first thing is substitute. We want to fill in the new and original into the formula. Then we're going to subtract. We're going to subtract that new minus original. Once we do that, we're going to divide. We're going to divide that change by the original. And the last thing we're going to do is convert. We're going to convert that decimal value to the percent. Remember, that's by multiplying by 100. Hope this helps.